Hello there. Hello, everyone. Hello, Laura, and she reads a lot, and Odd Rolls, and Ali, and there were several names that flashed up. I'm so glad you're all here. I'm so glad you're joining me for this fireside reading of The Woman in White, continuing our spring season of murder mysteries. This is especially interesting, I think, because I did an audiobook about Wilkie Collins, the author. And the book was really good and interesting, and I'm especially interested in that period. I'm a fan of Dickens, who, as most of you probably know, happens to be my cousin somehow, all the way back up there. Fourth cousin once removed, I believe. Actually, first cousin 4 times removed. I think that's what my cousin, who is a genealogist, told me. So Wilkie Collins and Dickens were very good friends, and they were in plays together and played cricket together and did a lot of things they used to do in those days, and they were competitive. Both were highly successful. Dickens has sort of lived on a bit more than Wilkie Collins, but this book has been suggested by many people and is a classic, and I've never read it. So together, we're all going to read it and go on the adventure, which is one of my favorite parts about fireside reading. As an aside, I got an email from Odd Rolls, and she sent me to a Twitter universe that was all about a character that I played on television several years ago called Giles, on a sadly short-lived show called Who Done It? And I had no idea this whole world exists. So thank you, Odd Rolls, for showing me it. And thank you. I don't know whether you put those. There are endless posts about and involving Giles. It certainly was a lot of fun to make that show, and I'm very glad that you enjoyed it, along with all the other people who do. I wonder how many firesiders are fans of that show and found this through that. I'm sure there are a few of you. Otherwise, I started Fireside Reading when the lockdown started, thinking that there would be some people like my mum, who sadly isn't with us anymore, but if she had been with us, she'd have been very lonely and wanted some entertainment. So I thought, well, what better way to use the wonder of the internet to connect with people who might just like this thing that I do, which is sit in front of the fire and read an old book to anyone who might like to join us. And today, it's a big day because we're starting a new book. I hope we all enjoy it. This book was written in 1859. Welcome to a fireside reading of The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. The story began by Walter Hartright of Clement's Inn, teacher of drawing. Chapter 1. This is the story of what a woman's patience can endure and what a man's resolution can achieve. If the machinery of the law could be depended on to fathom every case of suspicion and to conduct every process of inquiry with moderate assistance only from the lubricating influences of oil, of gold, the events which fill these pages might have claimed their share of the public attention in a court of justice. But the law is still, in certain inevitable cases, the pre-engaged servant of the long purse, and the story is left to be told for the first time in this place. As the judge might once have heard it, so the reader shall hear it now. No circumstance of importance from the beginning to the end of the disclosure shall be related on hearsay evidence, when the writer of these introductory lines, Walter Hartright by name, happens to be more closely connected than others with the incidents to be recorded, he will describe them in his own person. When his experience fails, he will retire from the position of narrator, and his task will be continued from the point at which he has left it off by other persons who can speak to the circumstances under notice from their own knowledge just as clearly and positively as he has spoken before them. Thus, the story here presented will be told by more than one pen, as the story of an offence against the laws is told in court by more than one witness, with the same object in both cases, to present the truth always in its most direct and most intelligible aspect, and to trace the course of one complete series of events by making the persons who have been most closely connected with them at each successive stage relate their own experience, word for word. Let Walter Hartright, teacher of drawing, aged 28 years, be heard first. Chapter 2. It was the last day of July. The long, hot summer was drawing to a close, and we, the weary pilgrims of the London pavement, were beginning to think of the cloud shadows on the cornfields and the autumn breezes on the seashore. For my own poor part, the fading summer left me out of health, out of spirits, and, if the truth must be told, out of money as well. During the past year, I had not managed my professional resources as carefully as usual, and my extravagance now limited me to the prospect of spending the autumn economically between my mother's cottage at Hampstead and my own chambers in town. The evening, I remember, was still and cloudy. The London air was at its heaviest. The distant hum of the street traffic was at its faintest. The small pulse of the life within me and the great heart of the city around me seemed to be sinking in unison, languidly and more languidly, with the sinking sun. I roused myself from the book which I was dreaming over rather than reading, and left my chambers to meet the cool night air in the suburbs. It was one of the 2 evenings in every week which I was accustomed to spend with my mother and my sister, so I turned my steps northward in the direction of Hampstead. Events which I have yet to relate make it necessary to mention in this place that my father had been dead some years at the period of which I am now writing, and that my sister Sarah and I were the sole survivors of a family of 5 children. My father was a drawing master before me. His exertions had made him highly successful in his profession, and his affectionate anxiety to provide for the future of those who were dependent on his labors had impelled him from the time of his marriage to devote to the ensuring of his life a much larger portion of his income than most men consider it necessary to set aside for that purpose. Thanks to his admirable prudence and self-denial, my mother and sister were left, after his death, as independent of the world as they had been during his lifetime. I succeeded to his connection, and had every reason to feel grateful for the prospect that awaited me at my starting in life. The quiet twilight was still trembling on the topmost ridges of the heath, and the view of London below me had sunk into a black gulf in the shadow of the cloudy night, when I stood before the gate of my mother's cottage. I had hardly rung the bell before the house door was opened violently. My worthy Italian friend, Professor Pesca, appeared in the servant's place. and darted out joyously to receive me with a shrill foreign parody on an English cheer. On his own account, and I must be allowed to add on mine also, the professor merits the honour of a formal introduction. Accident has made him the starting point of the strange family story which it is the purpose of these pages to unfold. I had first become acquainted with my Italian friend by meeting him at certain great houses where he taught his own language and I taught drawing. All I then knew of the history of his life was that he had once held a situation in the University of Padua, that he had left Italy for political reasons, the nature of which he uniformly declined to mention to anyone, and that he had been for many years respectably established in London as a teacher of languages. Without being actually a dwarf, for he was perfectly well proportioned from head to foot, Pesca was, I think, the smallest human being I ever saw out of a showroom. Remarkable anywhere by his personal appearance, he was still further distinguished among the rank and file of mankind by the harmless eccentricity of his character. The ruling idea of his life appeared to be that he was bound to show his gratitude to the country which had afforded him an asylum and a means of subsistence by doing his utmost to turn himself into an Englishman. Not content with paying the nation in general the compliment of invariably carrying an umbrella and invariably wearing gaiters and a white hat, the professor further aspired to become an Englishman in his habits and amusements, as well as in his personal appearance. Finding us distinguished as a nation by our love of athletic exercises, the little man, in the innocence of his heart, devoted himself impromptu to all our English sports and pastimes whenever he had the opportunity of joining them, firmly persuaded that he could adopt our national amusements of the field by an effort of will, precisely as he had adopted our national gaiters and our national white hat. I had seen him risk his limbs blindly at a fox hunt and in a cricket field, and soon afterwards I saw him risk his life, just as blindly, in the sea at Brighton. We had met there accidentally and were bathing together. If we had been engaged in any exercise peculiar to my own nation, I should of course have looked after Pesca carefully. But as foreigners are generally quite as well able to take care of themselves in the water as Englishmen, it never occurred to me that the art of swimming might merely add one more to the list of manly exercises which the professor believed that he could learn impromptu. Soon after we had both struck out from shore, I stopped, finding my friend did not gain on me, and turned round to look for him. To my horror and amazement, I saw nothing between me and the beach but two little white arms which struggled for an instant above the surface of the water and then disappeared from view. When I dived for him, the poor little man was lying quietly coiled up at the bottom in a hollow of shingle, looking by many degrees smaller than I had ever seen him look before. During the few minutes that elapsed while I was taking him in, the air revived him, and he ascended the steps of the machine with my assistance. With the partial recovery of his animation came the return of his wonderful delusion on the subject of swimming. As soon as his chattering teeth would let him speak, he smiled vacantly and said he thought it must have been the cramp. When he had thoroughly recovered himself and had joined me on the beach, his warm southern nature broke through all artificial English restraints in a moment. He overwhelmed me with the wildest expressions of affection, exclaimed passionately in his exaggerated Italian way that he would hold his life henceforth at my disposal, and declared that he should never be happy again until he had found an opportunity of proving his gratitude by rendering me some service which I might remember on my side to the end of my days. I did my best to stop the torrent of his tears and protestations by persisting in treating the whole adventure as a good subject for a joke, and succeeded at last, as I imagined, in lessening Pesca's overwhelming sense of obligation to me. Little did I think then, little did I think afterwards, when our pleasant holiday had drawn to an end, that the opportunity of serving me, for which my grateful companion so ardently longed, was soon to come, that he was eagerly to seize it on the instant, and that by doing so he was to turn the whole current of my existence into a new channel, and to alter me to myself almost past recognition. Yet so it was. If I had not dived for Professor Pesca when he lay under water on his shingle bed, I should, in all human probability, never have been connected with the story which these pages will relate. I should never, perhaps, have heard even the name of the woman who has lived in all my thoughts, who has possessed herself of all my energies, who has become the one guiding influence that now directs the purpose of my life. Thank you all so much for joining. We read maybe 20, 30 minutes every day, depending on the length of the chapters. If there are shorter chapters, we sometimes do 2 or 3 of them. Sometimes we do a part of one, depending on the length. I'm thoroughly going to look forward to this book. I hope you join me a lot. I will upload the chapters to IGTV on Instagram, and you can find them there, and also to YouTube, where you can find every chapter, and hopefully you can catch up when you have to miss one. Thank you all so much for joining me, and I can't wait to see you all tomorrow, same time and place, 5 Pacific, at Fireside Reading on Instagram. All the chapters uploaded to the YouTube channel Fireside Reading pretty soon after I do it. But until I see you all again, everyone, please stay very, very well. Good night.